And we're back. Moving back to Western Europe for one question. Don't you find it a bit ironic that as Western Europe turns to smaller government, that as it deregulates, that as it sells off to the private market state assets, and starts means testing state benefits, raising the retirement age like they just did, I believe, last year in France, that the Occupy Wall Street movement seems to be, and that for certain the progressive movement advocates a larger role for the federal government in American life.
I don't find it ironic. I don't base what we don't really base what we do on what Western Europe does, I think, too heavily. I do think it's noteworthy. I think that, but it's not. I don't think it's any sort of sign of. I mean, to say that Western Europe is doing this, nation states aren't cognizant actors. It's not France and Germany doing it. It's the aggression of the 1% relentlessly pushes to increase their market share of everything all over the world. And that includes in Western Europe. So all over the place you see that pressure come out in, for example, in austerity measures or in privatizations. There's a lot of little battles to that, and some are won, some are lost. And when the interests of the 1% win those battles, you see things like that going on in places like Western Europe. But you also see a lot of pushback in those countries from what you could call our side, and just the same way you see them here in the form of Occupy Wall Street as well as other movements.
So you see those sort of austerity measures, or I would say them as classically liberal, trying to open up markets, as less a response to failed economic policies and shrinking economies, an effort to open that up, and more as a caving to pressure from the top 1%.
Yes.
Okay. So moving along, what are your feelings on the 2012 election? Are you satisfied, dissatisfied, neutral with our current president? What are your thoughts on the Republican contenders?
Which to take first? Okay, so as far as the Republican contenders go, because that's hard to ignore, I think it's, I have to kind of beg some confusion with our political primary process, that the three leading people the Republicans can come up with are that dislikable. I mean, really, especially between Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich. I mean, God, I don't. Who's excited about either one of them? I mean, whether or not you like some of the policies they're into, they're just really not likable people. And it's surprising to me that that's who we're left with, especially after so much dissatisfaction with Obama. And I think that a lot of the stuff that's come out of the Republican primary race is a lot of the rhetoric and the potential policies are incredibly destructive. I think one thing that's interesting that I want to point out is this thing that kind of got drummed up in South Carolina, where Gingrich started criticizing Romney for his participation in Bain Capital. I think that's really interesting because that gets at a real fundamental problem in a lot of conservative ideology and also liberal ideology, or just mainstream ideology. This issue of is that okay or not? That he was part of a private equity firm. The rhetoric of a lot of conservatives that's just so disguised in jargon, like this job creators business, makes it seem as though we want to leave people alone, be free to be successful. Everyone wants a chance of being successful, and they think, well, if we're taxing the rich, what if I'm someday rich? I don't want someone to take that away from me. But there's also a visceral reaction to he was part of that. He makes $10,000 bets on a whim, and he earns $46 million a year or whatever it is. Like, oh my God, I don't want any part in that. And Gingrich saw an opening there and took it. But then all of a sudden there was this blowback from Romney saying, hey, don't criticize me for being successful. And there's an interesting thing there. And I think. Yeah, well, I'll leave it at that. But I think that's interesting, and I think the Republican primary in general is upsetting to me. Although I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think any of them are capable of beating Barack Obama in a national election. As far as Obama goes and transition, I personally am incredibly dissatisfied with Obama's presidency. I think, and like a lot of people on the left, a lot of Obama's talking points during the 2008 election really spoke to us. A lot of the things he talked about: ending foreign wars, closing Guantanamo Bay, national health care, things like that really spoke to us. I heard Obama speak a couple times, actually. He's a fantastic speaker, and the things he was saying were terrific. That just has failed to materialize, almost all of it. And the things that his supporters would call accomplishments, I don't really agree are accomplishments, most of them. And whether or not, I think it is worth saying, whether or not that has to do with him being disingenuous, or him being genuine but part of a system that won't allow him to do what he wants to do, or him to just be in some way inept in the political system and not able to push his policies through. I don't know which of those it is, but at the end of the day, for people who are in need, it doesn't really matter. And when it comes to the presidency, you got to deliver. It's the top job in our executive, and he hasn't delivered for a lot of people.
Okay. Permit me to play devil's advocate. It's an odd spot that I'm now going to be defending President Obama, but just for the sake of argument, from my perspective as a conservative, it seems that President Obama has gone to bat for the progressives. We have a universal healthcare system that's going to be unfolding until 2014. He stood up he said his Justice Department will not defend the Defense of Marriage Act. He has stood up for quote-unquote gay rights, including getting rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, a Clinton-era policy. He's evacuated our presence in Iraq, to what consequence I think we'll know very shortly in terms of historical terms. He's leading a retreat from Afghanistan, and he has supported, less than progressive movements around the world. By less than progressive, I meant non-liberal movements against classical liberalism. So I don't really see what you still, in light of all that stuff, you still feel he hasn't. What sort of America were you looking for him to build?
As far as the policies, and we can get into the specifics of it. And I certainly wasn't saying that he is 100% a failure and has completely become a turncoat for the right. Not at all. And there's certain things, policies that Obama has enacted or has supported rhetorically that I agree with. At the same time, a lot of it isn't, I think, as much as it seems. I mean, an example for the drawdown in Iraq. I think that had been planned for some time. I'm glad that it happened, but there's still a lot of military contractors there in the place of troops, and we still have troops there training people, and